Good evening, everybody. My name is Josh Amaral. I'm the Director of the Office of Housing and Community Development. I want to thank you for coming out tonight to participate in the first of our two action plan forums. Some familiar faces in the room. I know that you have attended these in the past or are familiar with this process. Others that are not, I'll give sort of a brief overview. We have a full slide deck and presentation that we will go through. Given the limited size of the audience in the room, we'll probably go through some of those fairly quickly, but if you see something that's of interest to you, please stop me, slow me down, ask a follow-up. We want to be thorough. This meeting's really about you and your understanding of the programs that the city has available. Just by way of background, the city for many decades now has received community development block grant funding. We've also received emergency solutions grant funding, home funding, and other forms of aid from the federal government. Community development block grant funding, as you will soon hear, has some very specific community uses, but we have a rich history of using that in New Bedford. But it all starts with community engagement. So the money that's allocated to us comes to us with all these rules and regulations that we must follow, but we take a lot of pride in doing a good job by that, so we keep getting it year after year. And most importantly, we hear from the community about what the priorities are, what the needs are, and we take it from there. So this meeting, we also have one tomorrow, which will be on Zoom, virtually for the same purpose, are about hearing from you. We also do some research. This feeds into a 5-year planning process that we undertake as well to check on those community needs. And I'd also add that we do this every day. So we don't do this particular task every day, but we're all engaged in this kind of community work and assessing needs all the time. So we try to take the feedback from here, what we see on the ground, and put that together into a plan that goes on to the City Council and then on to HUD after that. With that in mind, I do want to acknowledge City Council President Ryan Pereira and also Ward 1 City Councilor Leo Choquette, who thank you guys for being here and for all your support of these programs and our office more broadly. So I'll jump into the PowerPoint. Also, I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge our team. Jen Clark, our Deputy Director, who puts a heck of a lot of work into making sure these programs flow regularly, but also that we're organized and on point and compliant with HUD. And that's probably like the tip of the iceberg for her job, which spans all much broader than that. I also want to introduce Nicole Corral, who is really keeps us on track in the office. And does a great job for us and make sure that these go without a hitch as well. So thank you to Jen and Nicole for being here and for all their work organizing this tonight. I know I'm very tall, but can everybody see the screen behind me? If we just go through, we're good? Okay. So, does this, can I do that? You do that. Okay. Okay, so for the overview of the meeting, we have a few different elements to cover, background, some of that I touched on, federal requirements that we're working through, this process, community engagement, the funding that we have, the eligible activities that we can use those funds for, how you or another community group would seek those funds with us, and then how we handle that process from then through dispersing those funds and then monitoring those programs as they happen in real time. And then obviously there's the opportunity for feedback, which we hope you came prepared to offer. So by background, this is what I mentioned. We are an entitlement city. Here we go. Cool. We're an entitlement city, which means we are one of, 1,000 or so communities that receive these funds. They're used to create strong, sustainable, inclusive communities and affordable housing for all. And they all align with the, sort of that central principle and premise. Our approach to this, as I mentioned, starts with a 5-year plan. So we do that each 5-year period, and then within that, there's annual plans, which is what we're doing now. Last year was the big 5-year cycle. This is sort of year 2 of the 5-year cycle now. In that process, by the way, we assess affordable housing needs, identify community development needs, identify investment strategies and opportunities, and then priorities and goals through that. So that's really behind all of this. Going there, this covers our current year, which is this July 1, 2026 to June 30th of 2027 period. So It's a while till these programs kick into gear. Right now we're soliciting uses for the funds, which then kick up in earnest July 1. And so between now and then, we launch a process, we review those applications, and then we put things into motion. We do that simultaneously as we manage the programs that applied last year, and those are active now and sort of in the middle of their years. Here's the work of our office, engaging residents, nonprofits, developers, and other stakeholders around our needs and priorities for safe, decent, affordable housing, economic development, community services, and neighborhood revitalization. We utilize federal funds, to address that. The federal requirements on the next slide are using HUD-generated data, soliciting public input, establishing priority needs, addressing our numerical goals for the period. So there's a lot of compliance with the federal government, as you can imagine, and I think we knock it out of the park in that sense. We generate a lot of public documents in the process. So this action plan becomes a big public document. It's out for comment for a period of time so everybody can review it prior to its submission for approval. And along the way, we've produced a number of other documents too, including impediments to fair housing and a number of other studies. We're also working actively on our Building to Bedford housing plan, which in some ways complements our CDBG and other program vision. As far as the planning process, developing this plan, public engagement and listening, data research and analysis, producing that draft and making it available, and then producing the final plan. There's often little variation between the draft plan and the final plan, but it's an opportunity for everybody to reflect and see. Many of the nonprofit programs that we work with, or city programs, Pam, jump directly to the page with all the funding applications on it, right, and go, hey, where am I in here? We applied, what are we up to? But there's a lot of other valuable data throughout, and I think it's often cited as base of data for other people's reports and research in the city. Planning process, how's the community informed? Public meetings, community forums, Facebook posts, cable television, flyers, emails, website. If there's a medium that we can use to spread the word about this, we try to do it. We've embraced this virtual meeting tomorrow night as well as a means of getting more people participating and engaged. As you can see, this isn't a huge turnout. We're small but mighty. That's been our experience with some of these in-person forums. I think it's been our experience with a lot of community engagement activities these days. People have just generally withdrawn from a lot of it and gone to online forums and contribute in different ways. But that hasn't slowed us down from trying to get as many people out and active and engaged. And by the way, spread the word. If people have feedback for us, if they can't attend the event tonight, they can't attend tomorrow, they can email us, call us, show up at the office, carrier pigeon, you name it, we will accept it. We want everybody to be included in the process. We absolutely want to be open and accessible. And we've changed the venue and everything to try to accommodate that. As for funding, as follows a 6-part process on a neat flow chart.
Where the end?
Not the best way, but we'll do it this way.
Okay.
Okay, so first we determine needs in the community. It comes in a variety of ways. 2, we set our priorities, identify resources, establish our goals, administer programs that accomplish those objectives, and then we evaluate our performance, and we do it all over again. The evaluation of the performance is very important, right? We don't want to waste our time with strategies that don't work, and so we're constantly trying to think about, how things should work better, and so we often have to wrestle with, particularly these programs, supporting long-standing programs that need our support from doing like new and innovative things to test new methods and ideas, and so we try to balance that. As we talk about the resources, frankly, they've dwindled, right? The federal resources for this sort of thing have stayed pretty flat over time, but the cost of doing business has gone up, so we're able to do a little bit less pretty much every year, so we have to get more and more creative as time goes on. Of course, it's the top one, so I gotta jump. Funding this year, we anticipate community development block grant funding of $2.6 million, emergency solutions grant of $225,000, and home investment partnership program of $877,000. CDBG is sort of our core funding that supports a lot of the nonprofit activity and is probably what's drawing you out tonight. The emergency solutions grant is used to address homelessness. We've tended to use that for shelter, rental assistance, and street outreach activities. $225,000 is a lot of money to do a lot of things. It is a very small amount of money to do those things, so it's just a piece of the pie. And then the home investment partnership program, $877,000. That is also a lot of money and a lot of things. It is not in the terms of housing development, and construction, and things like that. So we've tried to use them again creatively and across multiple domains, whether it's home ownership or supporting larger developments. Eligible activities and accomplishments from this year. So any eligible activities must meet national objectives, benefiting low to moderate income persons, preventing slum or blight, addressing urgent community needs, and then not less than 70% of our spending must benefit low to moderate income persons. We've tended to be much higher than that, right, over time. So
98, 99%.
99%. So that's our goal. That's the purpose of all this funding. I'm often commenting on housing development that may or may not be income restricted, and I make the point that like the mission of our office is all about serving low to moderate income people. There's a lot of different ways to do that when it comes into economic development, but for the purposes of spending these dollars, they must be spent in that way, and so we heed to that very closely. Eligible activities within that category are infrastructure improvements like streets and sidewalks, public facilities, the rehab of buildings, particularly around handicapped accessibility. This is often used to support nonprofit activities or city facilities. Public services, recreation, health, counseling, case management for youth, seniors, people at risk. Most people associate, I think, CDBG funding with doing those kinds of services, but there's actually a cap. We can only spend 20% of our allocation on those sorts of things. And so that could be something for us to be mindful of. Park improvements, playground equipment, landscaping, lighting, etc. in eligible census tracts. Ashley Park is a project we recently did. We looked at Dias Field recently and are always looking to be part of the solution in renovating parks, in particular those parks that don't have active and engaged groups that are fundraising and doing those things, right? So again, back to the mission of improving the lives of low and moderate income folks in the city. Maybe it's a neighborhood without the resources to invest in their park, but we still want the park to be addressed. Housing and rehab, assistance to senior citizens, housing accessibility improvement, and general rehab assistance. We have some housing repair programs that we fund through this. Often that's providing help paying for contractors to remedy emergency problems like roof leaks and things like that in people's houses. But it's, I would say, doubly important that it supports our staff, which provide technical assistance to homeowners through those problems too. There's a lot of folks in the city that don't really know what to do when there's an emergency condition in their house, or they need to do some kind of improvement, or the porch is falling off and they have concerns from the building department or somebody else, and they're like, you know, just sort of in a panic. A lot of people are not well versed in hiring contractors and determining what the scope of work is, and so we're really able to help with that. We're able to help a lot of people in that way. We're able to help a somewhat smaller number of people with direct financial assistance to actually fix those problems. It still ends up being, you know, a few dozen people, but I think we have, you know, the staff capacity is an important part of that.
Question on that, John, sorry. Is
yeah,
that only for senior citizens, or is that for just citizens of New Bedford in general?
Citizens of New Bedford in general, they have to meet income criteria. It tends to be that seniors are often in the position of being homeowners with eligible income, but they're not the only category that's eligible. We help folks of all types in age ranges. Economic development, also job creation and retention activities, storefront facade improvements. We have that picture of People's Press up there. Our contribution there is the signs in the picture. Relatively small investment. Those small investments make a big difference in commercial corridors throughout the city. They help businesses get off the ground, and those businesses then employ people, and that's all good stuff. Micro enterprise development, again, small businesses and supporting those needs. ESG, the Emergency Solutions Grant, I mentioned this. We use street outreach, shelter, and then homeless prevention and rapid rehousing. Those are two forms of effectively rental assistance programs or homeless relocation housing programs. That was the $225,000. And then home funds, this is new construction, rental housing, first-time home buyer programs for low to moderate income persons, and then assistance to approved community housing development organizations, basically nonprofits that do housing development. We have a vanishingly small number of those in the city, but we have had a success in recent years with housing development, generally rental housing development, and a good number of the most visible housing developments you see downtown have been supported through home funds. And often it's a small investment from our office, but it leverages a much larger investment. So a developer might come with a project with a significant number of affordable rental units or income restricted units and say, we would like your office to provide, $20,000 a unit so we can go and get $400,000 a unit from somebody else. And so those are the sorts of the trades. But we do small rental rehab assistance programs as well. Small landlords, 2 families, 3 families, single family construction, depending on who the end user is going to be, all eligible for the home program. Here's some of our activities and accomplishments. So FY24, 36,000 city residents benefited from public facility improvements and city park upgrades. That's why we like to make those investments in city parks. Especially, we realize that it is a quality of life add for thousands and thousands of people because people utilize parks and a lot of people live within the vicinity of the park in those neighborhoods. Over 5,000 city residents benefited from public service activities. Those are the nonprofit programs, Council on Aging, Boys and Girls Club, things like that. And over 50 housing units were added, improved, de-leaded, or rehabbed with community development block grant and home dollars. In public services, some pictures of some of those activities. This looks like the Dream Out Loud Center. Last fiscal year, there were 17 public service activities, totaling roughly $345,000, including recreation and arts programming, counseling, senior programming, homebuyer education, and transportation. Transportation's a big one. There's not a lot of funders for transportation for youth-serving organizations, but it's a really important way to connect, particularly low and moderate income families and their children with services that might be held across the city somewhere, but all you got to do is get them there, but that's not always the easiest thing in the world to do. Economic development, through our investments there, 18 jobs are created or retained that were at risk of loss, or micro-enterprises were assisted in the last year, and through our office directly, the 18 were through the New Bedford Economic Development Council, which receives an allocation of community development block grant funding historically. And through our office directly, we assisted 9 programs with facade improvements, those grants for signs. Looks like here, Baskets of Grace, this Ready, Set, Learn, Casa Lempira on Christian Avenue. So a number of successful businesses that have been able to sort of brand themselves and look up to par. Public facilities, roofing doors at Dennison Memorial in the South End, so some big investments to that building, which is were well needed, and it's a great youth serving organization. And the demolition and site remediation at 1 Rear Coffin Avenue. So up on sort of the north end of the Acushnet River, there was a dilapidated mill that was sort of collapsing and unsafe, and we used community development block grant dollars and some other dollars to demolish that, clear that site, and hopefully clear for the potential for something new and exciting to go there in its place at some point, maximizing its location there on the river, but most importantly, remedying this long-standing health and safety hazard.
On 1 Rear Coffin
Yeah.
now. So do we lien the property owner that money?
Yes.
Okay. Would there be a way of, at this point, the next step in taking that land and turning that around to and selling it and getting our money back for that investment, so that we didn't taking it down and then being an active seller?
Yep.
'Cause I think the history with that site is that the owner is a beneficiary of that land, and they're from like the Midwest or something like that, right?
Yeah, there's definitely a sort of a problematic ownership history.
Yeah.
But you're right, so the next step for us is basically through the tax foreclosure process, in effect, the city will foreclose on that property sooner rather than later if the lien isn't paid.
Gotcha.
There's also some other liens and tax bills that are delinquent there. It is entirely possible that the private sector will solve that problem before we do, which would be great. That's probably the
It's
ideal
even better,
situation.
yeah.
Someone buys it, pays the liens, and moves on.
Of course.
But we're monitoring it closely because it's an important site
Yeah,
area
for sure.
to us.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, now, I've been speaking with Jordan from over here.
Yep.
And I guess, of course, you're familiar, I'm sure the council is familiar with the 319 South Second.
Yep.
Okay, that thing there is going crazy. And I've been by there, I used to be their mailman for 14 years, I spoke to the owner years ago. She's no longer in the area, I think she passed away, but the daughter's in charge of the place. And Jordan said they reached out to her, no response. That's a bad hazard there.
Yeah.
That's know what that is? That's a hazard to the firemen. Why, when I say that, because
Yeah.
the thing is, you see how big that building is?
Yeah.
You go restore something like that for what? You got firemen risking their lives for something like that? And it's not fair. I don't think it's fair to the firemen. It's not fair to the tenants on the sides, because something happens to one of them. This lady here doesn't have the concept. She's liable if that. You've seen that property, right?
Oh yeah, we're very familiar. That's a top code enforcement priority for us. In fact, the fire risk is real, right? The one immediately next door did burn down.
Right,
in a horrible
327,
fire.
because I know that house.
Yep.
I was a mailman over there too. I remember that.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying that 319 is just, that is going crazy over there.
Yeah, we are doing everything in our power, I think, to
Yeah.
remedy that problem. But unfortunately, there's a few of these where that's an issue where you either need you have to work with the owner or figure out some way to remedy the ownership situation and then consider demolition or how to rehab it and so.
But from what Jordan has said, she's non-compliant. She's not responding.
Yeah, unfortunately, that often means that the homeowners faces like an escalating series of actions from the city to hold them accountable for their property. I think there's some other complications to that one around who actually owns it and probate and stuff, which is often the case and further complicates things. But we're active on it.
Oh, thank you.
Yep. Parks and playgrounds, some examples there. I mentioned Ashley Park playground here, the new splash pad there. Part of that, and this here, which Jen has called the
Quantum climber.
Quantum Climber. So through all of the community development block grant funding, we can hopefully bring a quantum climber to a neighborhood near you.
Has to be done with a voice.
The quantum climber.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I'm getting older because I don't know how to play with it. But it looks cool. ESG, this was we have $225,000 this year, just to give you an idea, right, of the dwindling resources. We had $240 last year, so that's trending in the wrong direction there. Supported 6 homelessness programs that served over 455 people, 300 through emergency shelter, 14 through rapid rehousing, 60 through homeless prevention, and 83 through street outreach. I'll just say 14 people through rapid rehousing doesn't sound like a whole lot of people, but those are households moving into housing, first, last security often, sometimes several months of rent, to get them reestablished out of literal homelessness in most cases to back into those houses. It's critical for our homelessness programs to have sort of this continuum, right? To go from, you might be on street homeless right now, into shelter, then from shelter back to housing. If that system doesn't flow, the whole system gets kind of backed up, right? So people can't get into the shelter if there's no beds available. There can't be any beds available, people don't leave the shelter. So these funds are really just a drop in the bucket of what it costs to operate this operation, and we fortunately have some other funds that are not really on the table tonight that support some of it, but we are constantly mindful of those investments and how important even a relatively small amount of ESG is in achieving those goals. Home, we have our Neighborhoods First program, our first-time home buyer program assistance, providing households with down payment, closing costs, and gap financing assistance. This is a picture of first-time home buyer classes. We are a certified housing counseling office. We offer those first-time home buyer opportunities a few times a year, and it really, I think that program's gotten fairly sophisticated with an online component, in-person component, and we've seen a lot of people kind of graduate and go through those programs and get into this. We can provide, as it says here, down payment and closing cost assistance for eligible households. Over the course of the last year and a half or so, 2 years, we've been fortunate to have a program that allowed for support for a slightly higher income level, and now we're more or less confined to a slightly lower income level, which is tough because, as you guys all know, it's very hard to afford a home in today's market. And so we kind of have to thread the needle where someone has to make enough money to afford the house but not make too much money to not be eligible for our program. So, we're eager to help potential home buyers even if they don't know if they're eligible yet to work through that process. And anybody can take our classes. Those are freely available and open to everybody. Home accomplishments, OH City offers, as I mentioned, hybrid educational seminars. Include 4 online hours and 4 group class hours. There were 46 people who completed those in this last year.
Josh, on the Neighborhoods First, I heard that the funds pretty much ran out for that program. Is it coming back? Is it getting refunded?
So we'll have money. I mean, we'll probably allocate some in this year toward that program. Mm-hmm. But what has run out is specifically is the program that would cover up to 120% of the area median income for eligibility. So our normal program, what we'll fund additionally this year, is for folks that are at 80% of the area median income or below. And so we were able to cover people between 80 and 120. And you know, there are still folks that are below 80 that could buy a house, but not nearly as many as in that 80 to 120 band, which is really where homeownership becomes a little bit more feasible. But where you're going to make it work, some of the best arrangements are people buying two-family houses where you have rent that will support the mortgage coming in. And we like the story of someone who's moving like a relative in with them and buying the house together. We think that's a good way to find financial stability. We were also able to offer more money in the other program, so it was like $25,000. Our normal program is a little bit less than that. So, but we're eager. I mean, have people reach out to us. We have brochures in the lobby and can get more information to you too. We want to make it work. We want as many people as possible to know about it. And even then, there's a lot of mass housing and other resources, you probably know, that you can pair with it. So you might get $10,000 or so from us if you're eligible, but if you get $10,000 from us and $20,000 from somebody else, like now you're really cooking with gas. And so we're pretty good at helping connect those dots. Here are some other home projects. You know, a large example and a small example. 117 Union Street, which is from the New Bedford Development Corporation, sort of associated with the Housing Authority. Beautiful new addition to the streetscape on Union Street. And then here's a house on Independence Street that the nonprofit organization PACE purchased, used some home funds to rehabilitate, de-lead, make accessible, and that's been a long time coming and a good project. Oh, we've got more. 10 at 8th, now the flats at 8th up on Upper Union Street in the former registry building. That's coming to completion now. And 18 in Union down at the very bottom of Union Street, 28 units there. And so we've supported pieces of all of these projects using home funds, and so we're glad to see it. I mean, some 150 or so new units in the downtown. A lot of these projects were projects that people didn't think were possible. They did take some time and tenacity to put together, but having these resources at hand were hugely helpful. Beyond those grants, I mentioned other funds for homelessness, our Continuum of Care funds through the Bristol County Continuum of Care. This includes, here it's some of our data from our point in time count from 2025. The 2026 point in time count is nearing, but there are 201 people in emergency shelter, 78 people in transitional housing beds, and 574 people in permanent supportive housing beds in New Bedford. The Bristol County Continuum of Care, as it's in the name, does encompass all of Bristol County, with the exception of Fall River, but these are New Bedford data points. Applying for funding. So question one, how do I request funding? The only way to request funding is through our application process. We allocate funds to these programs and agencies this one time every year. It isn't like a rolling process. While sometimes I wish I had like a checkbook or a credit card or something we could just swipe when we heard a good idea. It's got to be structured in order to work. So that's how we do it. Where can I access the application? You used to have to basically put together like 8 binders full of information to apply. We moved it online thanks to the credit of our team. So there's an application available on the OHCD website. The link to our website is here. We also have a QR code available. Fancy, Jen?
Yes.
It's not just for your menu anymore at the restaurant. We have it for this. But the online application makes it relatively easy to apply. It also saves your information, makes things easier on our end for processing, and saves a whole lot of trees, which is a nice feature of the process as well. And 3, how can I learn more about completing an application? Well, if you haven't learned everything you needed to learn tonight, which is reasonable, we also hold a separate, 2 separate application workshops, one for CDBG, one for ESG, to help walk through sort of the finer details of what's asked in that application and then what our expectations are in responses. And we particularly encourage first-time applicants to avail themselves of that process. It takes a little bit more time, but I think that investment of time really pays off when it comes time to apply. Bear in mind, probably the vast majority of the agencies we fund or programs we fund are apply every year and receive funding every year. So they're pretty well honed at the process. We'd love to see new applications and new entrants into the process. In fact, I don't tell the people we fund now, but I probably have a bias toward new programs that want to demonstrate something new, and we really try hard to find a way to fund those things. But it does need to come in through a competitive application that checks the boxes we need it to check for eligibility purposes, And so we're eager to engage and try to help you figure out how to get through that process successfully. So Thursday, January 15th, that's 2 days from now, the CDBG workshops at 1 p.m., the ESG workshops at 2 p.m. at this Zoom link, which we'll also have available online. Two kinds of applications, CDBG, ESG, QR code, website link. All of this is available on the website as well, so if you go to the city website, Housing Community Development, you'll get to the same information and data. Next steps from here. This is our first of our community forums. Another one tomorrow. Thursday goes into our application workshop. Friday, February 13th, so fast forward like a month, 4 weeks or so, is the deadline of submission for all applicants in that online system. So we give everybody a solid month to put it together. We encourage you to reach out to us and ask questions in the meantime. We're happy to work through any technical challenges you might have. But Friday, February 13th, Friday the 13th at noon is the submission deadline. We then turn those around. We have an internal process to review all those applications against objective criteria. We look at past performance of existing recipients in that process. We draft together the annual action plan, which that draft will be available April 15th. We send that along to our friends on the city council for their review as well, and then ask them to vote on our plan, usually that third last week of May, which gives us just enough time to turn around to get to HUD. And so we always appreciate the council's support of that. I think there's a recognition that we have this robust process, and so that really helps things along. And in my time, and I think in my predecessor's time, really never any issues with the city council, right? Everybody likes to see these programs succeed. But part of that's the strength of our applicants and how thoughtful everybody is in putting this together, which makes us prepared to go into that setting and meeting. And then from the end of May, we wait back to hear from HUD for final approval. We typically get that seconds before the start of the fiscal year, maybe sometimes after last year. And as of July 1, that action plan becomes effective. Those programs can start operations, and then most of them work on a reimbursement basis. So they do the work, they bill us for money that we've committed to them, and then we pay back after that. So those programs will then run for that calendar year, and probably 6 months through that calendar year, or 6 months through that fiscal year, we have another one of these and start the process all over, plus all the other stuff that we try to accomplish here. So this is time for your feedback. What do you think about neighborhood revitalization, affordable housing, public facilities, community services, public infrastructure, economic development, homeless facilities and services, and impediments to fair housing? Basically, we'll hear anything, any ideas, but it's especially helpful if it's relevant to some of the stuff we talked about and you think might fit in some way. So, but it could be about anything. It could be about the Patriots beating the Texans next weekend. That's fine. Not about losing, but winning only. But any thoughts that you might have, please share. Just see what the next one is. Contact info. So I'll sit for this, and we can have a discussion if there's one to be had.
Yeah, I got a couple thoughts, Josh.
Sure thing.
So one, I think that we're seeing across New Bedford increase in housing stock thanks to your efforts, the Build a New Bedford plan, and just a general shift in the city government side of things with being a more developer-friendly city. Coupling that with some funding from this ARPA, there was some other sources that we were able to bundle some stuff together to make these projects feasible. With that being said, we have a long way to go till where we need to be.
Sure.
But are we also monitoring in regards to economic development and some other public infrastructure in those two areas that I see as the next pivotal crisis that we could have on our hands, like we are in the middle of a housing crisis? Are we also, while we're addressing the current crisis, looking at what could be the next one? And what are you seeing from your colleagues across the Commonwealth and the nation as far as trends into setting us up so that in 5 or 6 years we're we're ready to go when small businesses need our support more than ever, or when we need to gear up and then have more workforce ready to go as technology gets better and stuff like that, so.
Yeah, I appreciate the thought. I think we're constantly trying to monitor, those trends, here nationally. And like I said, we hold these processes, but on a day-to-day basis, we're trying to assess where the community needs are and, where there might be added investment. It's not a CDBG funded activity, but it's sort of a growth of our vacant building work, which originated, as you know, as a strategy around, it's a housing strategy.
Sure.
The theory being, if we can get vacant properties back online, that's a relatively quick and affordable way to get new housing units added. And they're not really new, but if they've been offline for a long time, they effectively are. And so for each one of these big apartment buildings that you build, where the apartments are $400,000 or $500,000 a piece to build, for $50,000 or $60,000 or $70,000, you could bring a single family house back online, or $100,000 for multifamily or something like that. So it's affordable and much faster than the way some of these projects work. But as a kind of natural extension of that work, we've looked more at some of the commercial properties, in particular vacant storefronts, because we know how impactful vacant storefronts can be to the immediate neighborhood, or conversely, how much of a sense of renewal you can get from a new storefront, a new business, particularly one that gains traction in a neighborhood and adds to how walkable it is, and an amenity that people don't have. So whether that's a coffee shop or a dry cleaner or whatever the business might be. So we got really good at identifying vacant buildings, and so we've tried to figure out how we can move that along to sort of play matchmaker between storefront opportunities and small businesses or micro enterprises that might occupy that space. And so I would just say that's one example of like sort of how we approach the work. There's a need to do this thing. Let's figure out how we can do it. Another change that we had in this last year's action plan, we set aside is a really small amount of money, but I think $25,000 for so-called neighborhood improvements. And the thought there was, if there's a stretch of sidewalk or a couple lamps to put up or a park bench or something like that, we needed a pool of money that was available to just fund that. So typically on our park projects and things like that, they come in as applications at this time of year like everybody else's, even though it's an internal city thing. But we wanted to have some money set aside for these small things that crop up. And I think over the in recent years, we've not done much on streets and sidewalks and things like that. But it's something that I think we'll increasingly look to do, especially in areas that are not set to be addressed for a long time through ordinary city government and things like that. They have to be in eligible areas, so that's one of the things. But we're mindful of that, and I'm open to shifting how we do it. It of course just becomes a challenge of like what don't we fund to fund this new thing? Of course. And so that's always the challenge.
And then my last comment, and it's something to think about, is on the topic of nonprofit developers. And how you said there's a shrinking portion. Is there any way, and this might be something that the private sector needs to do itself, but I didn't know if it's happening in other cities, of traditional 3 or 6 tenement homes, these traditional triple deckers, converting over to some sort of a condo, so that now the renters are building equity and not paying rent, but building equity and having starting to create generational wealth and other things that can be passed down rather than just there goes, especially with higher rents that we're seeing, $2,000 a month out the door for a 3-bedroom. It's actually going towards a mortgage. And what are you seeing in that? Is there something that could come to fruition here in New Bedford? Yeah,
actually, we had a meeting on Friday where that topic came up. It's come up periodically. One thing we've sort of learned or focused in on recently is the relative lack of a condo market in New Bedford compared to some other places. My personal theory is that that's because historically in New Bedford, the top of the market rents and the cost of home ownership were pretty much the same.
Right.
So, I don't know, it's probably going back a decade now, but if the mortgage for a starter home was like $1,800 or something like that. That was also like maybe a couple $100 more than whatever the top of the market rents were. And so if you wanted to be a homeowner rather than paying top of the market rents, you could just go buy a single family.
Right.
But now we've seen this split, right, where first-time home buyers are looking at like $3,000, $3,500 a month for their mortgage. But the top of the market rents are still around, $2,000. Some of the, maybe the brand new units are a little bit higher, but you get the split of over $1,000 in between, which I think opens up room for people who want to own something, but don't necessarily need, 4 walls, a roof, and the land it's on. They just want to own their unit and build equity, and then maybe trade up for that single family if that's their end goal. So I think there's an emerging market for that. We've seen some multifamily projects that are proposed as condos for the first time in a long time. As far as condoizing multifamilies, I think it makes rational sense to me. I was told once upon a time, I have not researched this, it's not fact check, that there are some examples of that exist in the city.
Okay.
I don't know what our regulatory environment is for that. Sometimes it's done through people's estate planning, they've assigned life tenancy and things. But certainly interested in pursuing that.
Yeah.
And that would be a really good fit, by the way, for our first-time homebuyer program, because those units are likely to be fairly affordable to people that are at 80% area median income or below, and so we could probably help with the purchase of it. Just an anticipated challenge. There's not a lot of, I think our development community has worked around this concept of buying and growing their portfolio of units, and for the rental income over time being the value add.
Right.
So it would be a mindset shift where now your value is to perhaps buy a rundown property, fix it up, and then sell the units, and so your payday is once, right? You're gonna sell the 3 units and then move on. We almost have to get that cohort, whether it's a nonprofit developer or a for-profit developer, to want to do that form of development, which is a little bit different than I'm going to renovate the property and then own it for the next 20 or 40 years or whatever it might be, pass it on to my kids as they often do now.
Sure. Yeah, but I think especially for a nonprofit, I think it could be something pursuable to help stabilize a lot of these neighborhoods that are just seeing tons of out-of-town landlords and investors buying up these multifamilies, really pricing out New Bedford residents, but now being able to stabilize those neighborhoods because a nonprofit steps in, condos the whole building, and then allows their tenants to transition into mortgages.
Yeah.
I think would be really, really beneficial.
We also tend to see that areas with higher rates of home ownership are cleaner, better kept.
Exactly.
And so, if you
A
have
sense of pride, right?
you get pride, you get skin in the game, you own your building, you own your unit.
No one wants to see their investment fail, right?
Yeah.
Or be treated poorly. So having you owning your unit's going to make you take better care of it.
There's so the meeting we had last week was specific to a new carve-out in the law around receivership of properties.
Yeah.
So there's a new law that passed that allows for receivership effectively by nonprofit development agencies, where if they commit to selling the property to a first-time home buyer, an income-eligible first-time home buyer, they have kind of a streamlined receivership process. And so that's where that concept came up. Since you have to sell it to a first-time home buyer, could you buy a multifamily and then sell the units individually, or does it have to be the whole house?
I see.
We've talked about it in a few forms. We're hoping that that's a way to build the capacity for some of our nonprofits as well. But receivership's a tricky business.
Yeah, sure. Okay. I do have to fly, but I wanted to thank
Yeah.
you and your team for putting this presentation together. Great job. I'll listen to the rest of the responses on when this airs, and good luck tomorrow, and we'll see you at City Council at some point.
Thank you, Counselor.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Ryan.
Take care, Ryan.
Have a good night.
Have a
Take
good
care,
night,
Ryan.
Ryan.
Yes.
Keep dancing.
Yeah, I will.
I got you on film.
So, to piggyback off of his comments, is that something that we could apply in, the TOD districts?
Yeah.
Because if you look at the Middleborough Lakeville stops, that was like an explosion of concentric rings of development in the middle of Lakeville.
Mm-hmm.
Right, Lakeville's not the kind of place you would go and see like a big box retailer, right? But you do see it because it's just over the last 20 years. And then you have those condos, right? And back when I rode the train to go to Boston, it was like a little more than a cement path into the woods with a parking lot. Now it's like a big deal. So, how can we guarantee we do something like that down at the Church Street station, for instance?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're open to all forms of development, but.
And I don't mean to make it Ward 1 centric. I mean, I'm the Ward 1 councilor, so obviously I'm biased.
That's right. We don't blame you for that. We don't blame you for that. I would say, Councilor, we're interested in the idea and looking to stimulate development activities around the train stations, because while that's happened in other places, it takes an active effort over time, I think, from the municipality to happen. So we want to see it go. I think where a condo strategy would really take root is if there were a champion for it, whether that's the nonprofit or private sector developer that wants to do that type of thing, and they're coming to us looking for home funds to assist in creating those units, or home funds to subsidize the buyer of those units afterwards, and we would certainly talk about that. And as you know, we'd use the full range of city strategies outside of even the CDBG process around, tax increment financing and things like that, if that were what were needed to move the ball forward. But we've operated that our increased housing prices are a function of supply and demand. So our theory is if we build more housing to satisfy the demand, that will hold prices steady or even reduce them, as it has in many municipalities across the country. So that the evidence is clear that that's the strategy, and we've embraced that and added some 1,500 or 1,600 new housing units to our pipeline to be built. But that's still probably not even half of what we need. So we continue to explore all those strategies and maximizing our TOD districts in a way that's affordable and keeps local residents engaged and living in the areas that they're familiar with is a top priority.
Yeah, because my big crusade is turning Kings Highway Plaza into the next South Coast Marketplace. Like the old Harbor Mall in Fall River. That should be a Church Street Marketplace, not, $6 stores.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a vulgar waste of opportunity for business development. And look, I got nothing against Dollar General. I'm in there every frickin' day for something, right?
I agree with you.
But it's just,
Overkill.
it is extreme overkill.
It is.
I mean, we should have stores like a Kohl's, a Ulta, Skechers, Old Navy, and according to, this is being recorded so I won't get political, but according to other people in the city in higher levels of power, people in New Bedford don't meet an economic grouping or level to want to shop at those kind of stores. Well, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Who's going to the Dartmouth Mall then? To these stores? Or who's going to the South Coast? Like, if you built it closer to where all the people are, they would go there. It's a shorter distance, right? Unfortunately, business development's we've had problems with the tax rate over the years, right? And that's kept most of these companies and retailers from building on the periphery. Fairhaven is just jam-packed with stores. Dartmouth, I mean, it couldn't be more obvious, right? I mean, the two communities that are adjacent to us are just slamming. I mean, imagine all the money that Dartmouth gets from that commercial mecca it's got, right? I mean, their budget allows them to do so much more, right? Now, yes, the taxes have been killing us over the years, but now we got a commuter rail station right there. You're literally delivering a captive audience of people, right? So it's like the Harbor Mall, South Coast Marketplace in Fall River, right? And I drive by there all the time when I go to get my Audi fixed, because I have to drive all the way to William Canning Boulevard. But I'm always driving by and I'm like, that's like beautiful. And they don't even have a train stop right there, like, And in addition, we could put in some condos and some mixed income housing, and look, we're never going to be Patriot Place, obviously, right? But we can get creative with what we have, right?
I have to agree with him because I go to work out well up on
Yep.
Kings Highway.
Yeah.
All the buildings are vacant. It's owned by Pontiff. They own all these.
Oh, does Jeff Pontiff owns those?
They own all that property. They own everything. The only place they own is McDonald's, I heard, because they own all that. And
Yeah.
they even own the new restaurant depot.
Yep.
They own the land, they're leasing it.
Yeah, it's owned by a national real estate trust called Wheeler.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so the thing is,
But they've recently had it on the market to sell, and there's the movement over there.
well, it's
These are largely private sector. There are things that the city can do to be more welcoming, but
downtown too, right on Union Street, the old main event, you know, and all that. It's up to lease, bacon.
Yep.
You know,
I think that is Pontiff. Yeah,
It is him.
yeah.
And the
In the
thing is,
downtown.
I reached out to him one time and said, what do you want for the rent for the main event? Oh, 5,000 a month. I said, okay, I'll see you next lifetime. That's a song by a certain person.
Thank you.
And if you just, I don't mean to keep harping on this, but like, we've done so many great things in this city building,
You're doing a good job. You're doing a good job right now.
but Kings Highway is moving backwards. And what I mean by that is, remember, if you guys remember it like 25 years ago,
That's right.
I was barely in college back then. Some of you guys might not even have been born
You
yet.
had Shaw's, you had Shaw's.
You had
all-
Shaw's, you had Newport Creamery, you had Papagino's, you had a movie theater back this where I saw Star Wars Episode
Oh, yeah, the
1.
Ocean's 18.
Is now workout well.
Workout World, yeah.
Ocean's 18.
Yeah, you had that. You had Payless Shoes, you had a Toy Works toy store. Now, and I'm not disrespecting the type of businesses that are there, because something's better than nothing, but like literally the only store that has stayed the test of time is the Golden Star Chinese restaurant next to Sally's Beauty. Like, those are the two things that have
Yeah.
survived over the
Right.
last
That's right.
20 years
That's
over.
right. That's right.
So, I guess my point is, again, this thing is, it's starting to move forward with Chipotle. It's wonderful to have that.
Restaurant Depot, Ollie's.
That's right.
Yeah, Ollie's is a good store, absolutely, but
You brought up a good point, because here's the thing too, you talk about congestion, the mall's congested because of what you just said.
Mhm.
So you take those stores, you put them over in Kings Highway, there's a lot of parking over there,
Yeah.
right, totally. And the thing is, the North End has a chance, instead of going out way over North Dayton, they'll support that right there. He's exactly, I'm telling you.
Well,
I see
So
it.
If you put those stores over there, traffic's gonna be hell, because it already is, so.
Yeah, but
Well,
the
let me
thing
fix
is,
to that too, Brandon. But I would love to grab a coffee and talk about this problem. But unfortunately, relative to community development block grant funding, there's not an eligible area,
yeah.
and I think there's relatively little we could do. I mean, we could be supportive of different efforts over there, but we're probably not going to solve this problem in this action plan. So I don't want to cut the conversation short, but if there's any other comments specific to the plan or eligible activities, I do have some thoughts on that. We'll talk about.
Yeah,
Go
I
ahead,
know
Ellen.
one, because the thing is, I live at Roosevelt Apartments, and
Oh, yeah.
I talked to Joe Lopes about it. And for historically, we've had chalk sidewalks, and they're bad, they're broken. They're broken all over the city.
Mhm.
I'm serious, when you go over there, between Union and Arnold with Union and Norton, the whole sidewalk is broken. Broken in pieces. And so I said, well, they said, well, it's historical to have chalk. Yeah, but that was then. We're in an age right now where they don't replace chalk sidewalks, do they? No, they don't. So why not just get rid of all of them and just have a regular concrete sidewalk? The other day I fell one time, I was like, whoa, I might be the next owner of the city. No, I was just joking. But I'm just saying, it doesn't serve any purpose. There's no historic, it's not like downtown where you get Johnny K. Kill, you get the cobblestones, that's historical down there. Arnold Street is not historical. It's not. And that's why, those used to see it. I mean, it's just a mess.
Yeah, we'll note that, and maybe it's an argument for sidewalk improvement funding or
I
something.
talked to Joe about it before, because that's his ward.
Yep.
And I said, you ought to look at it, because the tenants are really upset over there at Roosevelt Apartments. They come outside, they go across the street, it's all broken up. Chalk is not the way to go nowadays, because the thing is, the conditions of the weather. The weather is brutal.
Mhm.
It takes a toll on that. Years ago, I've been in the city for 74 years, I'm 74. And the thing is, I really never paid attention to that chalk stuff. All we used to use that is to write, break a piece off and write on it, whatever. But I'm just saying,
Yep.
he's totally right about, that plaza, because when you got repetitious, Dollar Tree, Family Dollar, they're doing it everywhere. Family Dollar is down over on Jenny Lynn Street now, Dollar Tree, Seth McDonald's, it's just over, it's It's crazy.
Now, you think pennies, you get pennies. You think dollars, you get dollars. And I'm not saying, we're gonna have the Rentham outlet there anytime soon, right? But, there's a compromise that we can have. And again, don't forget that the airport's right across the street, and that whole terminal is gonna be torn down and rebuilt. We're gonna have the most modern airport in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Exactly.
Not like Logan, obviously, but, and there's a shuttle that'll go from the airport right over to that commuter rail.
Oh, yeah.
So people will be having a circuit where they land, get off, get on the commuter rail, get on the shuttle bus, literally find themselves right by the parking area and the shopping area. Think of how much economic dollars you could capture.
Well, and like you said, because here's the thing too. Now, when they knock down all that gas company and all that stuff, now I guess they're planning in the future, I don't know for sure, but I'm hearing restaurants, that's the way to go. Because the thing is, that's gonna be those tourists that are coming off that train, spending big money. It's in Providence, I go to Providence all the time. Restaurants, that's where people wanna go. You know why? They're getting the money's worth, they eating, it's comfortable, it's, I'm talking about, that's what you want restaurants. You want restaurants. That's always like those, restaurants.
I'll say, gentlemen, I think we are, we're wide open for business, but it will take certain private sector actors to want to move those things forward. Brandon?
So I have a question regarding the Neighborhoods First program. So can you help me understand the reasoning behind dropping the income limit to the 80%? Was it just so that more low-income people can have access to it versus people with higher incomes? I say this because as a real estate agent in the community, I can think of a specific client that I sold a house to, I want to say 2024, where that house was $345,000 on Court Street, right? And their mortgage is over three grand, right? So the way I see it is, if you lower the income limit, now you may be able to put lower income people into housing, but then you're kind of setting them up for failure, because it'll be tough to pay a mortgage of that magnitude, but also pay for the other bills, So it's kind of like setting them up for foreclosure in a way.
Yeah, I'll say, I'll take it in reverse a little bit. So we would never set somebody up for foreclosure in that, there's a lot of underwriting that occurs to make sure that someone can afford the mortgage, right? Unfortunately, that underwriting process often says someone cannot afford the mortgage at that income level, and so they just don't make the mortgage. And people sometimes are reliant on gifts from family members and things like that to try to make it more feasible. The income level issue was not a choice that we made. So the programs we're talking about tonight have an 80% area median income limit for first-time homebuyer programs or home ownership programs. We used a separate pool of money whose limit was 120% of area median income to fund this sort of one-time program. So it's called ARPA, the American Rescue Plan Act, coming out of the pandemic. It allowed for those higher income levels. So we used that, we advocated for the highest possible income levels so that we could help all of the folks that are in between that are eligible. But as that funding source expires, we don't have the discretion to say this source should fund that. If we could, we would. I promise we would. Because even in the years preceding the ARPA funded program, we did relatively few first-time homebuyer grants. And we'd like to do, we budget for several a year. We'd like to do as many as we possibly can, but we were only doing like 1 or 2 a year because that's how hard it was for someone to qualify.
Right.
Things may be easing up a little bit, but it doesn't. We don't feel satisfied if we're able to help 3 or 4 or 5 people buy a home. We'd love to help more, but we are somewhat constrained by the federal regulations that are in place. And we think the rationale behind an income cap and all that makes perfect sense, but whether that's the right cap and whether in this current market with home prices that have rapidly escalated, it's realistic for someone at making $50 grand a year to buy a house and pay $3,000 a month for their mortgages.
That's insane.
It's questionable, yeah. But that is the home buyer market these days,
Talk about rent cap. It should be a mortgage cap.
There effectively is to the bank.
Yeah, that's a 30-year mortgage?
Yeah, 30 years.
Wow.
So the ARPA funds have pretty much been depleted. So any money that goes towards the city programs is gonna go into that program where it's the 80% AMI income limit, right? So
Yeah.
is there, just to be clear, there still will be a program to help first-time homebuyers funded through the city, right? It's just a different
Yeah.
program?
There has been for decades, and there will continue to be in my tenure anyway. But if it's at 80%, the pool of people we can help is a little bit smaller than it would be if the income levels were higher.
Right.
But again, we do point people to other resources that are available in those higher income bands, and we try to coordinate with those other programs so that, when someone could take advantage of both programs, if that's what they need in order to become a first-time home buyer, then we help them with that. But we're big on first-time home buyer opportunities, and we'll do whatever we can to help. Okay.
I had a question about the economic development. You shared some data about how many jobs you had created, retained, protected. I want to know a bit more about what sort of jobs those were, how they were selected. If there was the strategy or location, just information about the sort of jobs.
Yeah, we might have a couple examples, but I can't rattle them off the top of my head. But here's how it works for us. So there is an organization called the New Bedford Economic Development Council. They're an independent nonprofit, but they tend to coordinate with the city around economic development objectives. And so the way that our funding has worked primarily for economic development, with the exception of the storefront signage program, they have submitted an application to us at this time of year for funds to fund their programming. And so we've funded their programming, and then they're the ones that have been out working with businesses and entrepreneurs to fund their operations. So they report to us, and so we have a record of the businesses and the jobs and stuff. I can't rattle them off because I don't work with them directly, but often they are small businesses with less than 10 employees. Some of the funds are used to retain those jobs, so the business might be struggling a little bit or facing some crisis, and so those funds are maybe a line of working capital to help them keep operations going so they can get back on their feet. In other cases, it's startup money for someone to open a new business or to invest in their business further. And so our focus there is the creation and retention of jobs for low to moderate income folks often, and support for these micro enterprises more broadly. I think the funds also support the Economic Development Council and their staff so that they can continue to do what they do. Similar to our home repair programs, which for every dollar spent in those programs, probably 50 cents goes to actual construction work, and 50 cents goes to technical assistance and guidance and fielding inquiries and calls and helping people navigate. So it kind of works similarly for them, and we've changed the model a little bit there over time, but we've tended to not exercise much discretion in terms of which business or what job. We've sort of delegated that to them to sort out and prioritize and then bring to us. So I think it's worked fairly well, but as Councilor Pereira alluded to even earlier, if there are emerging economic development needs in the city, where we owe it to the city to, in this process, to reflect on that and try to make changes to make sure that we're providing the resources in the right ways.
I just want to say thank you for holding this public forum for the public to come and speak and voice their opinions and comments and concerns. I think that helps significantly with building trust with the community, and we appreciate your efforts, the efforts of you and your team.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it's needed in this community because the thing is, there's not enough people there coming together to make a difference. You don't have to be a council or whatever. You just have to come together and voice your opinion. If you got opinions, you should be here voicing your opinion.
Mm-hmm.
You're paying taxes, but you want to sit back and make all these comments. I watch them on TV, the council. I think they do an excellent job because the thing is, I think they're dealing with people that are too shy to come out and talk. I'll be there February 17th. I got something. I'm going to be speaking.
Excellent.
There's
Wow.
something that's happened to me that was really good today. So
I will tune in. I will tune in and thank you guys for your comments. I'll say right back at you, thanks for coming out, right? You could be home watching TV, putting your pajama pants on.
Yeah,
of course,
this is more important.
if people are doing that tomorrow, they can still join us on Zoom. As long as the camera angle's right, we're good. But thank you guys for taking time and coming out, right? There's a whole lot of competing interests for everybody's time, and we appreciate you sharing your opinion and coming out and even learning about these things, because It does help foster trust between you and us and you, but I think also allows you maybe to evangelize our programs a little bit out in the community too. You know, you'll run into somebody who runs a youth program or does something that might be eligible or has a sidewalk that needs to be fixed, and you can go, hey, contact the Housing and Community Development Office. They might have some resources that can help you. They can help your aunt put a new roof on her house, whatever you might need. And if they can't help directly, they could probably give you some advice or give you some steer in the right direction. And so that's what we're all about. We're proud to give back to the community, and we're a department dedicated to that mission. And so coming to work with these guys every day is a whole lot of fun. But it's only fun to the extent that people come and chat with us. So thank you so much for your time, and please continue to follow the process and engage with us. And we appreciate your partnership.